My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped animal as I stood frozen outside the hospital room where my father had just drawn his last breath. The plastic bag in my hand held his old watch and house keys, still carrying the faint scent of black coffee. Then my phone lit up with Aunt Melissa's text, the words slicing through the sterile air like a blade. Your father cut ties long ago. We have the $3.8 million Apex migration this weekend. If you walk out to cry over a dead man, do not bother coming back. And consider your grandfather's inheritance permanently forfeited. In that moment, grief twisted into something sharper, colder, more dangerous. She had no idea she had just handed me the match to burn her entire empire to the ground. I am Amanda, 31 years old, and in that freezing hospital corridor, the last chain of blind family loyalty finally shattered. The glowing screen blurred for a second as hot tears stung my eyes, but I forced them down. My father lay behind the closed door, gone too soon, and all my aunt could send was a business threat? No, I'm sorry. No, take all the time you need. Just cold calculation about a migration deadline that apparently mattered more than blood. For 5 brutal years, I had been the invisible spine of their corporate kingdom. On paper, I ran my own tiny tech firm. In reality, I had written every line of core code, built the server architecture from nothing, and guarded the data gateways that kept their millions flowing. Aunt Melissa reigned from her marble-clad corner office on the 40th floor, sipping imported wine while Brandon strutted in vice president suits bought with company cards. They collected the applause and the fat paychecks. I collected midnight emergency calls and condescending reminders that my work was simply family duty. My father had escaped that world long ago. He was the arranged black sheep who chose a dusty little clock repair shop in rural Wisconsin. I could still picture him hunched over that scarred wooden workbench, sleeves rolled up, the air thick with the honest smells of machine oil and fresh black coffee. He taught me that real value takes time, patience, and quiet integrity. Lessons the Glass Tower family never understood. I knew the ugly truth they hid from investors. As the one who actually touched the data, I saw the desperate wire transfers, the over-leveraged assets, the personal guarantees Melissa had signed to keep her lifestyle afloat. That $3.8 million Apex migration wasn't routine. It was her final lifeline. One failure, and the banks would seize everything. Mansions, cars, the CEO title she worshipped. Later that same afternoon, I walked into her glass-walled office, funeral home brochure clutched in my damp palm like a shield. My voice stayed steady, even though my stomach twisted. 4 days. That's all I'm asking. 4 days to bury my father. Brandon leaned against the mahogany doorframe, rolling his eyes with theatrical boredom. Melissa finally looked up from her monitor. The vicious ultimatum left her lips exactly as it had in the text, but this time I saw the tell, that frantic little twitch in her jaw. She wasn't just arrogant. She was terrified. Terrified that the niece she had treated like cheap labor might actually walk away and pull the plug on her fake empire. Every Thanksgiving memory flashed through my mind. Me standing at the far end of the long table, refilling her empty wine glass without her even glancing my way, fixing server crashes at 2 a.m. while they laughed at the family IT girl. The years of swallowed pride, of being the obedient ghost who kept their world spinning. But today, the obedience was gone. I forced my face into a perfect blank mask, met her eyes, and gave one slow nod. Understood. Then I turned on my heel and walked straight out of that gleaming glass tower, the revolving door whispering behind me like a final goodbye. The drive north blurred with a storm of emotions, grief, rage, and a strange growing calm. When I finally pushed open the door of Dad's old clock shop, the brass bell chimed the same welcoming note it always had. The scent of sawdust, old oil, and black coffee wrapped around me like his arms one last time. I set my laptop on his workbench, the wood still warm from years of honest work. My fingers moved with surprising steadiness. I opened the administrator dashboard. I owned the entire core architecture, ironclad copyright under my independent company. The family had never owned a single line. They had simply used a vendor access key I had foolishly given for free. One click. Vendor licenses revoked for direct terms of service violation. Then I rerouted the client portal. Their sleek million-dollar interface vanished, replaced by a stark, undeletable error screen. Service suspended. Legal and license violation by management. I sat back on the old stool, heart hammering, the shop clock ticking steadily in the silence. 10 miles away, inside that 40-story glass tower, every monitor had just gone pitch black. The $3.8 million migration had flatlined. And I waited. My phone erupted like a hornet's nest against the workbench. Not one buzz, dozens. Brandon first. 14 messages in under 2 minutes, all caps, frantic typos, no punctuation. Servers down, Apex locked out. What the hell did you do? Fix it now! I swiped them away without replying. Then Melissa's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice. 3 times, letting the silence stretch. When I finally answered and tapped speaker, I placed the phone gently beside Dad's old soldering iron, the one he used to fix tiny gears with such careful hands. Her voice came through shrill, stripped of every ounce of that boardroom polish. Amanda, reverse this glitch immediately. This is corporate sabotage. I will sue you into the ground. Your little indie company won't survive the legal fees. I'll bury you. She kept going, threats piling on threats, voice cracking higher with each sentence. I listened without a word, staring at the dusty shelves lined with half-repaired pocket watches, their tiny hands forever frozen. Years of her voice ordering me around echoed in my head. Fetch this, fix that, smile and take the insult. She finally ran out of breath. The line hissed with silence. 3 long seconds. Then, calm as the tick of the shop clock, I spoke. My consulting rate is $1,000 an hour. I paused just long enough for the words to land. I just texted you a payment link. Put a $10,000 retainer on the corporate credit card right now, or the screens stay black. A choked sound came through the speaker, half gasp, half strangled laugh. Paying that invoice would mean explaining an emergency vendor expense to the board. It would mean admitting, in black and white, that the CEO didn't own the software powering her empire. It would crack open the lie she had sold to everyone. The line went dead. I returned to sorting Dad's tiny brass screws into their labeled trays, the soft clink, clink, the only sound in the shop. An hour crawled by. Then tires crunched on the gravel outside, slow, deliberate, heavy. Red and blue lights pulsed through the dirty windows, painting the walls in frantic flashes. 2 police cruisers blocked the driveway, angled like they expected resistance. My pulse kicked up, but not from fear, from something closer to dark satisfaction. Melissa had escalated. Desperate to hide her ruin from investors, she had weaponized the local police, filed a felony report, cyber terrorism, theft of corporate property, sent armed officers to drag the grieving daughter back into line. She expected terror, badges, handcuffs, a frightened girl handing over the code just to make them leave. I swung the front door open before they could knock. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch, hands resting near their belts, faces professionally neutral. The lead one spoke first. "Ma'am, we have a report of corporate theft and unauthorized system interference. We need immediate access to your hardware." I reached into the entryway drawer without a word and pulled out a single manila folder. Inside, state-certified business registration for my independent firm, federal copyright patents for the entire software architecture, stamped and dated 3 full years before I ever touched their servers. I handed it over. The lead officer scanned the pages slowly, eyes flicking between the documents and the police report on his tablet. He checked dates, vendor IDs, ownership chains. Then he closed the folder and passed it back. My phone still sat on the console table, speaker active. Melissa's breathing rasped through it, waiting for the moment I would break and surrender. The officer leaned down toward the microphone. His voice dropped low, cold steel. "Ma'am, this is a civil contract dispute. If you misuse emergency dispatch again to bypass a vendor payment, I will personally drive to your office and place you under arrest for filing a false police report and wasting city resources. Do not contact this woman again." He ended the call himself with one firm tap. The cruisers reversed out of the driveway, lights fading into the dusk, carrying Melissa's last desperate bluff away with them. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a long, shaky breath. The real trap had already begun to close. I never needed to email the board. I made the clients do the destruction for me. At exactly 2 p.m. the next day, the Apex executives logged into the portal to start their $3.8 million data migration. They hit my hard-coded error screen. They read the words, "Service suspended, legal and license violation by management." Panic spreads faster than fire in boardrooms. Within minutes, Apex was on the phone with the family board of directors, threatening to yank the entire contract and sue for gross negligence. Inside the 40th floor boardroom, the crisis meeting unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Melissa sat at the head of the long mahogany table, sweat beading at her temples, hands trembling as she clicked uselessly at a mouse that could no longer reach anything. Brandon shrank into his leather chair, staring at his polished shoes, mute for once. The investors demanded answers. Cornered by Apex on one side and their own board on the other, Melissa had no choice. She had to confess, voice cracking, makeup smudging, that she never actually owned the core software running the company. That she had lied to shareholders, lied on loan applications, and just triggered a multi-million-dollar breach because she refused to let her niece bury her father. The board held an emergency vote right there. They stripped her CEO title effective immediately. They dissolved Brandon's vice president shares on the spot. Their empire collapsed before dinner. Security escorted Melissa out of the glass lobby that afternoon. She walked through the revolving doors clutching one cardboard box, her designer suits and entitled son useless against the millions in personal debt now crashing down on her alone. The board of directors called my cell the very next morning. They didn't bother routing through family channels anymore. No Melissa, no Brandon, no bloodline excuses. Just a crisp, professional voice on the line. Ms. Amanda, we'd like to discuss a direct multi-year licensing agreement with your independent company. The Apex deal is salvageable if we move quickly. I sat on the back porch of Dad's little house, coffee mug warm in my hands, watching the Wisconsin sun rise slow and gold over frost-tipped fields. The contract they proposed was generous, far more than I had ever dreamed of asking. Royalties, equity stake, full operational control of the architecture I had built. The family empire, as Melissa had known it, was already fracturing into pieces. Thursday morning arrived cold and sharp. I stood in the quiet, grassy cemetery on the edge of town, a small cluster of Dad's old friends gathered around the simple wooden casket. No suits from the glass tower showed up. They were too busy dodging bankruptcy lawyers and scrambling to explain the sudden blackout to furious clients. I stared down at the fresh-turned earth as the minister spoke soft words about time, patience, and the quiet beauty of things well made. A strange, heavy peace settled into my shoulders like a warm coat on a winter day. People always say turning your back on family is the ultimate betrayal. We're raised to believe blood is sacred, unbreakable, that you endure the abuse, show up at the holiday tables, bleed yourself dry to keep the fragile illusion of peace. But standing there by my father's grave, the truth cut clean and clear. Walking away from Melissa and Brandon wasn't cruelty. It was the purest act of self-respect I had ever committed. Blind loyalty to a toxic bloodline is just self-betrayal dressed up in polite words. I never lit a match to burn their empire. I simply removed my hands from the pillars they had leaned on for years, the invisible labor, the midnight fixes, the code they never truly owned. Their own arrogance did the rest. The weight of it crushed them the moment I stepped away. And in that quiet cemetery moment, cutting that final cord felt like the truest way to honor the man who raised me. Dad had always said real value takes time to build. He built clocks that lasted generations. I had built software that powered an empire, and now I was finally building something for myself. 4 months later, the federal bankruptcy court sealed the liquidation of the family holding company. Aunt Melissa faced formal indictment, 2 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of falsifying corporate records to secure that $4 million commercial loan she had personally guaranteed. To dodge actual prison time, she took a brutal plea deal. 5 years of strict probation and court-ordered restitution of $2,500,000. The social fallout was ruthless and swift. The elite country club where she once held court quietly revoked her membership. The high society friends who used to toast her imported vintages suddenly couldn't remember her number. Cousin Brandon auctioned off his custom sports cars at public sale. The proceeds barely covered his mounting debts. Last I heard, he was stuck in a mid-level data entry job, reporting to a manager young enough to be his intern. 6 months after the funeral, a pale pink envelope arrived in my mailbox. The return address was a modest apartment complex on the other side of the city. Inside, 2 full pages of Melissa's flowing cursive, manufactured nostalgia dripping from every line. She wrote about missing our family dinners, how my father would have wanted us to reconcile, how she had only pushed me so hard because she saw my true potential. I stood at my kitchen counter, thick parchment paper in my hands. The old, suffocating guilt that used to rise like bile was gone. My chest felt impossibly light, almost hollow in the best way. I folded the letter once, twice, then dropped it straight into the trash bin. No reply. No angry text. No dramatic closure. Just silence. Deafening, perfect silence. My independent firm grew fast after securing the direct Apex contract. We hired 12 sharp new engineers, moved into bright office space with windows that actually opened, built a culture where respect wasn't optional and no one's weekends belonged to someone else's crisis. The greatest victory, though? My time finally belonged to me. This past Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner in my own home. My lead developer brought her famous pecan pie. My college roommate flew in with bad jokes and good wine. My husband carved the turkey while Dad's old buddies from the clock shop swapped stories about late-night repairs and stubborn gears. We ate off mismatched plates, laughed until our sides hurt, and not one person asked me to sacrifice my peace for their profit. Society drills it into us. Family is sacred. Blood is thicker than water. But what they never tell you is that toxic people will weaponize that exact belief, turn it into a chain to extract your labor, demand your silence, drain your soul. They don't love you. They love what you provide. If you're exhausted from carrying ungrateful weight, write these 3 rules somewhere you'll see them every day. 1. DNA is biology, not a lifetime past to disrespect you. You owe nothing, not your mental health, not your money, not your peace, to a shared surname. 2. True power isn't screaming or revenge. It's quietly withdrawing the invisible labor they depend on. Stop fixing their messes. Watch how fast the illusion crumbles. 3. Peace costs a fortune, but staying in toxicity costs your soul. Losing the inheritance, shattering the family myth, it hurt. But it bought back my autonomy. Have you ever carried the weight of people who would discard you the moment you chose yourself? What unpaid labor are you still giving away today? I'm Amanda, and for the first time in my life, I am completely free.